and is designed to trigger the body's immune system. Teacher Steve Young was the first person to take in what's being described as a groundbreaking clinical trial.
I had any fear because by doing the trial, I feel like I'm actively doing something to give it a kicking, basically.
And for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Ben and Pip.
Good morning. This Friday morning, welcome to Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Ben Leo and Pip Thompson.
Very good morning to you. So lots of you talking about this poll this morning where GB News viewers have said that there's a 13% surge in support for Labour, amongst other things. Lots of you on gbnews.com/your say are saying that you weren't contacted about this poll. There was nothing on the members area or on the website. It wasn't on the members area or the website. It was just a general poll of people who had said they'd watched GB News previously or had done in recent weeks. It was about 500 people. So that's where it comes from. But there is a stark contrast between the poll results and what you're saying on gbnews.com/your say and the emails. So I'll just make that point. But, yeah, the stats say that there is a 13% surge in support for Labour.
Yeah, viewers included in the polls say they trust Labour more with the cost of living, the NHS and housing. So we'll dig into this a little bit more. GB News' political correspondent Olivia Utley joins us. Good morning to you, Olivia. So how surprising is this? Labour 11 points ahead. 1 in 4 GB News viewers who voted Tory in 2019 switching to Reform.
Well, I think this is a real headache for the Prime Minister. GB News viewers are perhaps an audience who a Conservative Prime Minister like Rishi Sunak might presume he would have on side. But that obviously isn't the case. GB News viewers cannot be taken for granted by the Conservative Party. Labour is trusted more on the NHS and on housing. And housing has been a particular weakness for the Conservatives over the last sort of 5 years or so. This is a pressing problem, particularly among the younger generation. And we saw a couple of weeks ago that the age at which people start voting Conservative, we know that older people tend to vote Conservative, has now reached something like 71. Now, that is obviously a serious issue for the Conservatives, both in this election and going forwards. The sort of silver lining for Rishi Sunak is that the Conservatives on this poll are still more trusted on illegal migration than Labour. And of course, illegal migration is a very, very important issue to lots and lots of people. In fact, it often comes first or second in the list of priorities for people in the issues facing the UK. Now, Rishi Sunak managed to get the Rwanda plan over the line this week. It's now received royal assent. And in the next sort of 6 to 10 weeks, he is hoping that flights to Rwanda will actually get off the ground. He thinks that that will give him a little boost in the polls, and perhaps this poll bears that out. The idea that the Conservative Party is already more trusted on illegal migration suggests that maybe once those flights get off the ground, the Conservatives could be looking at a slightly rosier picture. But of course, the local elections are next week. We'll start to see the results of those next week, and by then there will be no flights to Rwanda off the ground. So it might, for the people, just be a little bit too little, too late to save Rishi Sunak's skin.
Yeah, Olivia, I said as much yesterday. We've had some really bombshell policies and announcements from not just the Prime Minister, but Labour as well in recent days. But as far as Rishi Sunak is concerned, a lot of people are saying it does feel a little bit too late in the day with just months left until a potential election. Why didn't the Conservatives get to grips with what their supporters and their members want years ago, as opposed to leaving it, months?
Well, I think that's a very good question. And actually, I think more specifically in the last year or so, I've spoken to a lot of Conservative MPs who feel as though the government have just been sort of inexplicably dragging their feet. Rwanda is a very good example. Emergency legislation was tabled back in January, but for some reason it wasn't until this week that finally got over the line. Yes, there was resistance from the Lords. Yes, there was resistance from Labour. But surely Rishi Sunak could have predicted all of that and had it baked in. There doesn't seem to be been much of a sort of sense of urgency with this government, which, as you say, Ben, is pretty odd, given that a general election is now mere months away. The real test is going to be next week with those local election results. And if the polls are anything to go by, then it's really not looking good for the Prime Minister.
OK, Olivia Utley in Westminster, thanks very much. Yeah, very interesting poll results. The only thing I would say is the poll said Hillary Clinton would win in 2016. The poll said Remain would win in 2016. They didn't. They also said that, who was it, Corbyn in 2019, and we had the Boris Johnson avalanche. So take of that what you will.
Keep your eye on those local council results, though, next week. I think they will be interesting.
Probably
and what happens
indicator.
after that in terms of the Prime Minister's future, you know, it's not done and dusted that he will be campaigning as Prime Minister ahead of the election. He could be forced out.
Yeah, I think it was
Suella
Braverman said that she refused to rule out that she'd support a new leader before the election. So, interesting. Right, now, let's move on. Has it become a safer place since Russia invaded Ukraine? I know that's a stark contrast to a lot of the narratives we hear about safety of our country and Europe, at least. But according to a former defence chief, it has become more safer. So Air Vice Marshal Sean Bell says that the war in Ukraine has depleted Vladimir Putin's forces so much that Russia is no longer a threat to Europe.
You might be in the minority thinking this, Sean. You're here. Good morning.
Good morning.
Just explain then a little bit more, because we're not just talking about boots on the ground with Russia. I mean, we're talking about their nuclear capability as well here.
Yeah, good morning. I mean, first of all, this newspaper article, I was supporting a journalist of a national newspaper, and funny old thing, what came out on the newspaper was not representative of the conversation that we had at all. But the central theme of it was, as a commentator, as a former military guy, I do quite a lot of commentary these days, and I get informed by MOD and some pretty significant seniors. The worry is that the media is fanning the flames of this being on the verge of World War III. I get walked up to regularly and asked, are we with fear in people's eyes? And the honest answer is no. It does feel a more dangerous place. Of course it is. But are we on the verge of World War III? No. When I was in the Ministry of Defence, the driving threats that governed what we configured our defence for were Russia and China. Now, Russia has played its hand in Ukraine and played it badly. We were really scared about Russia's capability. It has proven that it hasn't been that capable at all. It's lost thousands of main battle tanks, hundreds of thousands of soldiers. It has depleted its military significantly, and the threat it once posed is no longer as credible to the rest of Europe for at least another decade. It does not mean we're safe. It simply means that actually, in terms of the Russian threat, we shouldn't be playing a World War III narrative. That doesn't feel appropriate at all for our nation.
Well, Sean, that's the tone of what you're saying there is a lot different to what we hear from people such as Tobias Ellwood, who says that we're heading for not world war, but a world at war. And also General Sir Patrick Sanders, who said that, you know, talking about conscription of our young people. So why? I mean, who's right? Are you right, or are they right?
There's no right and wrong on this, Ben. I'm grey-haired, old enough to know that there's nuances in all of this. Some of our military leaders inevitably are using this as the opportunity to try and get more money for defence. They want a bigger army, bigger navy, bigger air force.
We need all that, though, don't we?
Well, I'm a pragmatist as well. Of course, as an ex-military guy, I'm going to want more kit. But the reality is that we are living in a country where we've got the biggest overdraft ever, we've got an NHS on its knees, etc. Are there other ways we could enhance security in this country? One of those is we're a member of NATO. That's a central pillar of our defence capability in this country. Last information available is 11 out of 32 countries actually pay their 2%. So, in a way, we are subsidising some of the NATO countries that are not paying their way. Now, I understand that we're on track for about 50% of the countries now paying their way, but it does feel that before we take even more of a pinch nationally, we should be looking to some of our NATO colleagues to actually step up as well, particularly some of those countries that are rather closer to the threat than we are.
Do you think, therefore, you just alluded to it there, that NHS spending should take priority over defence spending, that defence spending should not be the top three
No, I think
Top
what
of the
I'm
list?
saying is that the number one priority of any government is to defend our nation, and I absolutely believe that is central. My point being is that governments, again, I've spent a long time in the military side of this, the governments throw money at a problem and hope it goes away. How we deliver defence, I think it's a lot more subtle. We are, have we learned nothing from the war in Ukraine? Russia is using technology, Ukraine is using technology far more. Drones, have they had a really manifest difference? The Houthis terrorising the Red Sea even though they don't have a navy. The Ukrainians who don't have a navy pushing the Russian navy out. There are some fundamental lessons for defence that fall from this. And how we configure defence, yes, we need ships, tanks and aeroplanes, but we also need to embrace that technology in a Team UK approach rather than simply just focusing on the defence companies.
Regarding the war in Ukraine, we know they're getting lots more weaponry now from us, from the United States. Do you think that war remains finely balanced? Does it tip now more towards Ukraine winning? Do you think it could still end up with where there'll be some settlement done?
Well, there's a
If
lot.
Putin wins, does that put us into a much more perilous situation, more akin to what you were deemed to have said, which you now say was misrepresented?
Yeah, no, I think if Putin does come away from this conflict with any form of win, however he paints it, I think that will leave Putin emboldened, and that clearly is a worry for the West. But also it's what China feels. It will be looking at this to work out whether it wants to go into Taiwan or not. If Putin prevails and gets away with it, surely that emboldens China as well. In terms of the weapons going in, I think, Ukraine's been on the back foot in this conflict for the last few months. Momentum is everything in warfare. It will take a while, probably months, before that momentum is reversed. Just because somebody in America signed a form doesn't actually get the weapons in the hands of the warfighter. That will probably be months before the tide is turned. Whether or not Ukraine can actually prevail. Last year, we were sat here at this time of year waiting for the spring offensive, expecting that Russia would be swept out. The front lines didn't really move at all. I have to say, I think it's going to be very difficult for Ukraine to win, whatever that means. And I suspect, therefore, it's going to be a very difficult year for Ukraine in the year ahead.
So, Sean, I asked Mark Francois yesterday or the day before about the extra £500 million we're not sending it to Ukraine, are we? That we spent on weapons, which will be probably made here, BAE Systems, etc. So money in the economy, jobs. However, when does that end? When does our support, our financial support to Ukraine end? Is it completely unconditional, as Jeremy Hunt said? Is it a bottomless pit of taxpayer money? When should we pull the plug, if ever?
Yeah, I think the 500 million, the interesting bit about that is that no nation on earth carries the war stocks to be able to sustain a war of this level. So you've got to industrialise your defence industrial base. In the Second World War, it was stop building cars, build Spitfires. We haven't done that yet. Russia has tripled the size of its defence industrial base. Oil revenues are paying for weapons coming in from North Korea and from Iran. It now has a sustainable model to keep this war going. What has Ukraine got? And what we haven't done up till now is invest in our defence industrial base. That money was designed to get industry who are not going to invest to deliver half a dozen shells. If you're going to deliver weapons over a 10-year period, industry will invest. And that's why the government has said we're putting industry on a war footing. It wasn't meant we're going to war. It's trying to create a sustainable model of weapons, not just from this country, but encourage the whole of Europe and the US to do the same. Because at the moment, it feels a bit of feast and famine for Ukraine, which is thoroughly unhelpful for its war effort.
OK. Retired Air Vice Marshal Sean Bell, thank you so much for coming in to talk to us and giving us your analysis there. Thank you.
Thanks, Sean.
Well, coming up next, Ireland says it's already being flooded with migrants as Rishi Sunak's Rwanda bill finally becomes law.
You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Ben and Pip. Stay with us.
I'm Gloria Di Piero. This is GB News, Britain's election channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Farage, Monday to Thursday from 7 p.m.
These are very tough times for Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister and leader of the Conservative Party. Some polling out overnight, done by Lord Ashcroft, published in the Daily Mail, suggests his personal net approval rating is now minus 59. Give you some context of what that means. That puts him on an equivalent of where John Major was back in the mid-1990s, but more interestingly, almost exactly where Jeremy Corbyn was on the eve of the 2019 general election. But there's something even worse than that in this polling. It suggests that on defence, taxation, migration and Brexit, and think about those four, because they're all areas that historically would have been stronger for Conservatives than for the Labour Party. In all four of those areas, we find Labour are now more trusted. Keir Starmer's Labour Party more trusted than Rishi Sunak's Conservatives. Now, history suggests that things can turn around. It suggests that as elections get closer, polls narrow. And I can think of the 87 general election, but perhaps even more so the 1992 election, when everybody thought Neil Kinnock would win the election, and yet John Major got a majority of just over 20. I don't think the polling in those days was quite as accurate as it is today. I don't believe it's really about Rishi Sunak. I think if Winston Churchill came back and led the Conservative Party, it wouldn't really help their ratings very much. My belief is it's the Conservative brand that's really taking the hit. 14 years, people feel very let down. Nobody quite believes anything they come up with. I believe that the Tory brand is absolutely in the bin. I don't think Rishi can recover. But tell me, am I wrong?
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Nigel Farage, and this is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 9:50, you're with Ben and Pip on Britain's Newsroom, only on GB News. Now, the recent passing of Rishi Sunak's Rwanda bill has caused migrants, apparently, to flee to Ireland so they don't get deported to the African nation.
More than 80% of recent asylum seekers have crossed the border from the UK, and Ireland's Foreign Secretary says he's concerned about the impact this will have.
Whilst on UK soil, the Home Secretary James Cleverly has said a succession of initial flights to Rwanda have been booked and that the £1.8 million cost per asylum seeker was justified. 1.8 million, is that right?
Per asylum seeker?
I think it's more like 180k.
Well, it costs a lot of money.
Yeah.
The whole scheme,
the whole scheme's
upwards
hundreds
of
millions,
half a billion, could get higher. Well, GB News' political correspondent Catherine Forster joins us now. Catherine, I mentioned earlier about Ireland saying it's flooded with migrants. I want to apologise for that because I'm not quite sure that that was the wording that was used. So can you just clarify? Migrants, we understand, are heading for Ireland.
Yes, that's right. This was a comment by Michael Martin, the Deputy Irish Prime Minister, earlier in the week, in which he said basically that 80% of migrants arriving, asylum seekers arriving now in Ireland, have come from the United Kingdom. They've come across the border with Northern Ireland because, of course, there is no hard border. That was a condition of the Brexit deal. To maintain that, we now have effectively a border down the Irish Sea instead. But what it means, of course, is that people crossing the channel illegally on small boats who are fearful of being sent to Rwanda now can get back into the European Union this way. Now, of course, this is very bad news for Ireland. He has said that the Rwanda deal, which of course was finally passed by Parliament in the very early hours of Tuesday morning and gained royal assent just yesterday, is already impacting on Ireland because he says people are fearful of staying in the UK for fear of being sent to Rwanda. Now, of course, the point of the Rwanda bill and the government's promises to get flights finally in the air to Rwanda in the next 10 to 12 weeks, so potentially by the middle of July, is to stop people crossing the channel in the first place, to make them think, hang on, if I'm going to be sent to Africa on a one-way ticket, I'd be better off staying in France or Germany or Italy or one of the many countries that they will have crossed to get to the English Channel. That is the point of it. But this is good news for the government, frankly, and this does appear to already be having a deterrent effect, although we've previously heard from migrants on the French side of the Channel who basically took the whole thing with a pinch of salt. But that might be about to change, because the Prime Minister has said they intend to have a regular drumbeat of flights to Rwanda going throughout the summer. Now, if they start to get significant numbers off to Africa, as they have promised for 2 years now, 2 years since this plan was first announced by the then Prime Minister Boris Johnson, they really, really hope that numbers will start to drop significantly. Of course, as James Cleverly, the Home Secretary, said yesterday, it's only one aspect of how the government is trying to tackle illegal migration. We've all been very fixated on it because, of course, Rishi Sunak has promised to stop the boats, but at the moment those numbers are still going up.
All right, Catherine, thanks very much for that. Very much appreciated. The figure is 1.8 million. If the UK sends 300 people to Rwanda, it will end up costing 541 million, which works out 1.8 million per asylum seeker. Lots more to come in the second hour, including Hamza Youssef, his big predicament and his future. Stay with us. Britain's Newsroom on GB News. Back in a sec.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good morning. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update. It's going to be another fairly cloudy and rather cool day, and there's a few showers around for some. But for the time being, should stay fairly dry and bright through the rest of the morning, particularly across north and western areas of the country. Clouds going to bubble up though as we head towards lunchtime, and the risk of showers starts to develop. Though I think many areas across the north should stay fairly dry. Now towards the south, we start to see cloud thicken through this afternoon across many areas of Wales, into parts of the Midlands and across the south coast ahead of this showery band of rain that will push up northwards throughout tonight. And temperatures will be well below average for the time of year. So another fairly cool day today. Cloud will tend to fade away across northern areas through this evening, so it will be a clear and dry night once again across many areas of northern England, Northern Ireland, much of Scotland, and there is a risk of a further frost for Saturday morning. Across the south, though, cloud will continue to thicken as this band of showery rain continues to move northwards, but that will introduce some milder air, so it's not going to be quite as cold across southern areas of England and Wales through this evening. Now, it will be a bright but cold start across the north on Saturday. The best of the sunshine is likely to be in the morning. I think as you head towards the afternoon, cloud will bubble up once again, and there's a risk of a few showers, but again, most areas should stay dry. Across the Midlands, though, cloud will really thicken. It's going to be quite a dull afternoon, and temperatures will be suppressed. And in the south, any brighter spells that develop could pep off a few showers.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding in Antrim on the A2 Shore Road at White Abbey. It's down to a single lane each way after an accident near the Methodist Church causing queues. In Edinburgh, the A90 is partly blocked eastbound by an accident on Queensferry Road. Barnton taking 20 minutes in queues heading into the city. In North Yorkshire, the A64 is partly blocked by an accident at Stockton-on-the-Forest causing delays. A couple of accidents on the A14 in Suffolk. It's partly blocked westbound between junctions 54 and 55 towards the A12 near Ipswich causing queues. Then further towards Bury St Edmunds, partly blocked by an accident between junctions 46 and 45 from Thurston to Rougham causing queues from junction 47 at Woolpit. And in London on the A13, the inside lane is closed westbound where a lorry's broken down just after the Beckton flyover causing queues. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
It's the final week to see how you could win our biggest prize yet. With thanks to Variety Cruises, a family company sailing since 1942, you have the chance to win a £10,000 7-night small boat cruise for two. With flights, meals, excursions and drinks included, you'll be able to choose from any one of their 2025 Greek adventures. Plus, you'll also win £10,000 in tax-free cash to make your summer sizzle. And we'll pack you off with these luxury travel gifts. Hurry, as lines close on Friday. For another chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me. My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter, with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country. That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's election channel. And from Thursday the 2nd of May,
the people decide.
As the country heads to the polls in a rush of elections, we'll take you through the night as the first results come in.
And we'll pick up at breakfast
with the very best guests and analysis.
And on the weekend, the results won't stop, and neither will we.
We'll explore what it all means for you as we look ahead to the general election.
Continuing coverage live from Thursday the 2nd of May at midnight on GB News.
Good morning. It is 10 a.m. on Friday, the 26th of April. This is Britain's Newsroom with Ben Leo and me, Pip Thompson.
Very good morning to you, and thank you for joining us as well. Coming up, the SNP in crisis. Tensions are high in Scotland as embattled First Minister Humza Yousaf cancels a planned speech this morning ahead of next week's no confidence vote. We're going to bring you the latest from Glasgow.
Rwanda bill now law. The scheme has passed after months of deadlock, but Ireland says it's already feeling the effects, with the country's Deputy Prime Minister saying they're receiving an influx of migrants.
And the GB News viewers vote. They say that in an exclusive poll held by this channel, support for Labour has soared by 13% ahead of the Conservatives. Will you be joining the ranks of voting Labour? Let us know.
Benefits warning. The Department for Work and Pensions must help claimants move from benefits to universal credit, says MPs, warning that a failure to do so could end up in real-world misery for thousands of people.
And the disgraced mogul behind the Me Too movement, Harvey Weinstein, has had his 2020 sexual assault conviction overturned. And Weinstein apparently crying tears of joy in his New York prison cell off the back of that judgment in New York. But what does it mean for his other convictions in LA? And will the New York District Attorney, Alvin Bragg, will he pursue a second trial? We'll find out.
Yeah, there's been plenty of reaction to that from people all over the globe. Let us know what you think about all our other talking points. What do you think of that GB News poll? Labour going well ahead of the Tories. Do let us know. gbnews.com/your say. Here's your headlines now with Sophia.
Pip, thank you. Good morning. It's just gone 10. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB Newsroom. Your top story this hour. 2 men have been charged with immigration offences after the deaths of 5 migrants, including a young girl, who were trying to cross the English Channel. Yiyen Both, who's 22 and from South Sudan, and Tajdeen Abdulaziz Yuma, who's also 22 and from Sudan, were both charged with offences related to the deadly incident. An 18-year-old Sudanese man has been bailed pending further inquiries. The 5 migrants were on one of the several packed boats that pushed off from the beach at Wimereux in France on Tuesday morning. Scotland's First Minister is facing a leadership contest after his former allies in the Scottish Greens said they'll vote against him in a motion of no confidence next week. The decision follows the collapse of the SNP's power-sharing deal with the Greens yesterday, leaving Mr Youssef in charge of a minority government. The Greens are said to have been angered by Scotland's NHS pausing puberty blockers for those under 18 and the abandonment of the country's emissions target. A vote against Mr Youssef wouldn't automatically end his first term as First Minister, but it would throw doubt over his ability to govern. The world's first personalised vaccine for skin cancer has begun testing on British patients. It works by telling the body to hunt down cancer cells and prevent the deadly disease from coming back, and also has the potential to stop lung, bladder and kidney cancers. The jab uses the same technology as the COVID vaccines and is designed to trigger the body's immune system. Teacher Steve Young was one of the first people to take part in what's been described as a groundbreaking clinical trial.
I had any fear because by doing the trial, I feel like I'm actively doing something to give it a kicking, basically.
In the US, the actress Ashley Judd says the overturning of Harvey Weinstein's rape conviction is an institutional betrayal. Her allegation of sexual assault by the Hollywood producer was included in a 2017 article by the New York Times, which helped spark the Me Too movement. It's after Weinstein's 2020 rape conviction was overturned yesterday, after a New York court ruled that he didn't receive a fair trial. The district attorney will now determine whether to seek a retrial, though he remains in prison for other crimes. The founder of Me Too, Tarana Burke, says it's a massive blow to the movement.
We are devastated for the survivors who are connected to this case and the survivors who had found some solace and catharsis in the original verdict around Harvey Weinstein. And I think that we felt, and a lot of us felt, that we were on a road to seeing a different America. And this moment makes it feel like we were wrong.
Labour says that any benefits from recent changes to tax have been wiped out by rising inflation. The party's analysis shows costs for working households are nearly £8,000 higher each year. It found the average weekly budget for a typical household is up by £150, with everyday items like utility bills, food, petrol and clothes seeing a spike in cost. The government says its economic plan is working and inflation is now coming down, but Shadow Business Secretary Jonathan Reynolds says families aren't feeling the benefits.
The government to say, well, we've turned a corner, we've got there. Look, I judge how inflation's doing. I'm at home today, I'm talking to you from my home in Stalybridge. I go to Stalybridge Tesco and I see the price of ketchup, of cereal. I mean, this is what really matters to people. And it is gone up to a degree that no one's going to be feeling, the good times are back when they get their pay packet this week with a few pence off national insurance.
And MI5 is warning foreign states are targeting UK universities to undermine national security. Vice-chancellors from 24 leading universities have been alerted to the threat. The government and security services are worried that cutting-edge research could be targeted by foreign states to boost their own militaries and economies. The Deputy Prime Minister has announced a consultation on measures to protect Britain's universities. And for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Ben and Pip.
Very good morning. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Ben Leo and Pip Thompson.
Good morning to you. Now, First Minister of Scotland, Humza Yousaf, he's cancelled a planned speech this morning ahead of next week's no confidence vote.
The decision follows the collapse of the SNP's power-sharing deal with the Greens yesterday, leaving Mr Yousaf in charge of a minority government.
The no confidence motion was proposed by Scottish Conservative leader Douglas Ross, who branded the SNP leader, quote, weak and a failed First Minister. Joining us now is Scotland reporter Tony Maguire. Good morning, Tony. I can see why Douglas Ross called him a failed First Minister. We had the Gender Recognition Act, which was torpedoed by Westminster. We had the hate crime act, which was, widely mocked, not least by J.K. Rowling. And, of course, this latest furore is Humza Yousaf's backtracking on net zero, which the Greens were infuriated about.
Yes, indeed. It's been a long list of failures, according to the opposition parties. Certainly Douglas Ross, he made no effort to shield his true feelings. No point did he mince his words yesterday. And in fact, it's worth saying that all the leaders of Scotland's political parties, including Anas Sarwar of Scottish Labour, even Alex Cole-Hamilton came out First Minister's questions yesterday, leader of the Scottish Liberal Democrats, with something of a zinger, saying that now 2 clowns have left the clown car, but this circus goes on. And indeed, that circus must be an all-week fantastical, because today, on Friday, we are still left with continuing sequence of events. Humza Yousaf was supposed to be delivering an independence speech at Strathclyde University here in Glasgow. That speech in the last hour has now been cancelled, and it's understood that he is now considering his position as First Minister, in complete contrast to what was being reported last night, when he said that he was not considering his position. Now, understandably, the backlash from this decision to drop the Greens before essentially the Greens could drop the Scottish Government seems to have cascaded into something of an unstoppable force for the First Minister. Westminster SNP leader Stephen Flynn, he seemed confident that Humza Yousaf would come out swinging today, come out fighting for his role as First Minister. But indeed, the cancelling of this event this afternoon pretty much looks like very much the contrary to that. And of course, Ash Regan, we know that due to this vote of no confidence, she could be the kingmaker or kingbreaker, depending what way you look at it. She has written to the First Minister this morning with her list of wants, demands, if you like, if he wants to engage in discussions with her. And of course, they include things like putting independence firmly back at the top of the agenda, and also protecting the rights of women after, of course, she was essentially ostracised from the Scottish National Party for her views on that gender recognition reform bill, which it turned out a lot of people agreed with her on. Now, certainly this is, again, another extraordinary day. We only thought we would perhaps be analysing yesterday, but it feels like today has a lot more secrets to unfold as the day continues.
We'll stay with it. Tony Maguire in Glasgow for us. Thanks very much.
OK, we're going to kick off the next story with this really quite staggering GB News poll finding that support for Labour among GB News viewers has soared by 13% in the last 5 years. I will say that a lot of you on the gbnews.com/yoursay and on the emails and on Twitter, you're saying that you were never questioned about this and you completely disregard the results. But I'll just put that out there as a bit of balance.
Viewers say they trust Labour more with the cost of living, NHS and housing. And as Ben said there, not all of you agree. You vehemently disagree, as we're seeing on the views on the screen this morning. But do let us know. We'll read out some of your thoughts, as long as they're not too rude.
Yes.
Joining us now is GB News' political correspondent, Olivia Utley. Olivia, yeah, quite surprising, the results then, aren't they?
Well, yes, I think very surprising for the Prime Minister, and proof that he cannot be complacent, even with a demographic like GB News viewers who he might expect to be Conservative supporting. What's particularly bad about this poll for the Prime Minister is that on crime, on tackling crime, over 70% of those polled said that they didn't think the Conservatives were doing enough. Now, being tough on crime is something that the Conservatives can normally pride themselves on. And Labour is normally weaker in that area. Well, this time around, it seems as though Keir Starmer is taking that centre ground. The only silver lining for the Prime Minister is that on tackling illegal migration, the Conservatives are still ahead of Labour. The Tories have just got their Rwanda bill over the line, and we are expecting to see flights taking off in the next 6 to 10 weeks, barring any last-minute court judgments. Sunak is really hoping that that will give him a little boost in the polls, but unfortunately for him, that boost won't come before the local elections, which are happening next week. And if the Conservatives do really, really badly in the elections, which most polls, including our own poll, are now predicting, that could lead to really low morale in the Conservative Party and potentially a slew of letters of no confidence in the Prime Minister. It is not by any means absolutely certain at this stage that Rishi Sunak will even be leading the Conservative Party into the general election.
Olivia, could next week's local council election results be? Some people say you can't read too much into them. Others say no. It could be quite a pointer.
Well, it's difficult to say. On the one hand, local election results, you can interpret them as sort of similar to by-election results in that people will be more willing to go out and vote for a sort of protest vote. They know that, the government isn't going to change as a result of a by-election. The government isn't going to change, obviously, as a result of a local election. So they might just vote for a Labour councillor in order to show the Tories that they're not happy with what's going on. So you could say that sort of can't be extrapolated. That said, if these results are catastrophic for the Conservative Party, it will lead to a lack of faith in the Prime Minister within the Conservative Parliamentary Party. And that is really, really dangerous for Rishi Sunak. What he does not want at this stage is for his own MPs to be turning against him.
OK, Olivia, great stuff. Thank you very much. Let's get the thoughts now of Statman extraordinaire, Jamie Jenkins. He's the political and economic commentator. Jamie, good morning. Is this poll result reflective of the wider nation? And also, a lot of our viewers this morning are saying, they're emailing and tweeting, getting on our inbox saying, none of us agree with this at all. It's completely skewed. What do you reckon?
Yeah, well, I'm sure that the way the poll probably has been conducted, like many polls, is you try and get a cross-section of different people. So they would have probably drawn a sample and identified people who watch GB News. So not everybody who watched GB News probably would have been asked the question, and some of them are coming forward this morning. But I don't think the poll itself actually is quite surprising when you think that the Tory members themselves didn't actually want Rishi Sunak to be the Prime Minister. They voted for Liz Truss, and obviously that was kind of a bit of a failure there for the Conservative Party. And I think ultimately what you've got is 14 years of Conservative power. And I think a lot of the voters, the GB News viewers, and just generally apathy across the country, where people probably are looking for change. And so rather than thinking the Labour Party is something that's going to be great for the country, they're just more kind of against continuing with the Conservative Party.
Yeah, and that doesn't necessarily mean, Jamie, that Labour has deserved a chance to run the country, does it?
No, and one of the things Labour always comes out well on is looking at overseeing the NHS. And where I live in Wales, you actually have a Welsh Labour Party who've been running the NHS for a while, and it's worse in Wales than it is in England. So I think ultimately, the Prime Minister is going to need to go to the polls at some point. It's unlikely he's going to get through. And what Olivia was just talking about, potentially votes of no confidence, the country aren't going to want to vote for a Conservative Party that's in disarray at themselves. So I think the time is probably up, and they probably need to rebuild now for the next 5 years, for the next general election, because it looks inevitable that it will be a Labour government.
Yeah, Jamie, I suppose the best marker of how a Labour government would behave nationally, as you said, is in Wales. The NHS on its knees, a complete influx of trans ideology in schools, which has been, really contested by campaigners. I just wonder, though, what's the likelihood of people who, once we do get a general election and they go to the voting booth and they say that they're never going to vote Tory, they probably would want to vote Reform but might be scared that it's just going to be a wasted vote. What's the likelihood of people saying, OK, well, look, I really can't stomach a Starmer government. I'm going to hold my breath, hold my nose and vote Tory at the very last minute?
Yeah, and no doubt the polls will probably flick a little bit way back, and that's probably why Keir Starmer is wanting an election now and Rishi Sunak is delaying one, because he's hoping that policies like inflation coming down will help kind of at the polls with the economic mood. It's unlikely we'll have a general election at the very end in January. People won't want to go to the polls kind of during the winter months. Talk of a summer general election. I think ultimately Rishi Sunak's going to be hoping that he can get some people on these planes to Rwanda to say we're starting to tackle that, having kind of been forced into not being able to get that through in previous governments. So So I think you might see some of that, but ultimately it's going to be a big uphill struggle now for Rishi Sunak.
OK, Jamie, thanks very much for your time. Interesting, isn't it? It's, everyone's got an opinion. There's polls flying around everywhere, you know, people betting on this, on that, but who knows until it happens.
Yeah, I mean, some people have said that I was crackers to even suggest that Rishi Sunak might be forced out. But I don't think it's beyond the realms of possibility.
No, Suella Braverman said a couple of days back, she said that refusing to rule out that she would back a leadership change.
If the polls are so bad, they might think, what have we got to lose?
Yeah, exactly. If the writing really is on the wall, and by the way, the government and Rishi Sunak will know more than any other poll. They'll do their own private polling, very in-depth, so they'll know. If it comes to the conclusion that we're going to be wiped out, I mean, why wouldn't they change leader? What have you got to lose?
Right, stay with us. We will continue that conversation, as well as digging into some of this week's headlines, today's headlines, with our news panel. Do stay with us. Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Offline and overlooked. That's what Age UK say millions of British pensioners are. Why? Because they cannot or won't access the internet. It's leading to digital exclusion. So the charities campaigning for public services like banks, utilities and even the NHS to maintain a more human approach.
Everything's online. People assume you've got a smartphone with a mobile number and an email, and without that you don't exist in this world anymore. We've got to try and get the government to see that it's so important to make people feel that they belong, because there's a feeling that the older generation just feel that they're forgotten, they're in the way, and we already know that anyway, but it's just another reason for them to feel that they're not wanted. They'll just accept it and they'll say, well, that's it, I can't do it anymore. And that's it, whereas other people would be really kicking and screaming. So we need to be the voice for older people.
Despite digital technology playing an increasing role in our lives, around 1 in 5 over 65s in the UK don't use the internet. Thornycroft Centre in Pontefract, West Yorkshire, provides a space for this age group to socialise and get help to go online.
I'm not that good with mobiles, so when you mention anything about online, I ain't a clue what you're talking about.
The closure of thousands of banks is also detrimental to the older generation.
A lot of our members what come, they tend to use cash. They don't like to use bank cards. I think a lot of it's trust or the lack of knowledge. They don't understand how it works. I think they're very vulnerable as well with online. It's really important that they're aware how to use it and how to use it safely.
So, in an online era, it's still crucial for many to have an offline option.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people.
To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News. The
People's Channel. GB News, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Good to have you with us. It's 10:21. Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Ben Leo and Pip Thompson.
Very good morning to you. We're joined now by social commentator Amy Nicole-Turner and director of the Common Sense Society, Emma Webb, in the studio. Good morning to you both. How are you?
Good morning. Not director anymore, but...
Yes. Oh, you're
old
not?
title, no.
Oh, pasture's new?
Yeah, not since January.
Oh, OK. We'll get that changed at the intro. Sorry about that.
That's all right.
Let's start, shall we, first of all, Emma, on Harvey Weinstein, the disgraced Hollywood producer. His 2020 rape conviction has been overturned
Yes.
Effectively, and that has caused quite an outcry.
So this doesn't mean, because it's been overturned, doesn't mean that he's not guilty. I think that's important to say. But I know, obviously, this is something that is a very sensitive subject for a lot of people. A lot of people will be very angry about this. But I actually think that this is a good thing. I think that it's right that this judgment has been overturned because, and especially from the perspective of a lot of people who are coming from a place of arguing for human rights. The right to a free trial is a human right. It's very important that people do get a right to a fair trial, and there were all sorts of problems with this initial case that have led to it being overturned, including the bringing in of witnesses and contextual evidence that effectively undermined the judge's verdict.
Egregious, improper rulings is what has been said.
Yeah, and I know you have Andrew Eborn on to talk about this as well, that there are all sorts of problems with this case. But the reason why I think this is so important is because in the States particularly, law and politics is becoming increasingly intertwined. And it's about people's faith in the legal system, but also if you have something like a case like Weinstein's, where you have a very strong public movement like Me Too, or in the case of Derek Chauvin, where you have the movement Black Lives Matter, that it's important that the legal system is robust enough to resist the pressures to do, as happened in this case, to essentially break the rules, bend the rules, to make things, to bring things into the courtroom, make things admissible that really shouldn't be, because they are keen to do the right thing. I think that's probably the charitable way of putting it. And I think it's because of the political pressure that seems to be the reason why they did break these rules in the first place. But
well,
of course,
let's just bring Amy in.
Just very quickly, if it is the case that he is guilty of these things that he was found guilty of that have now been overturned, that's also not fair to the victims.
Well, one of the problems, Amy, is, well, first of all, we don't know yet that there's going to be a retrial. That's the first thing. And secondly, you've got all these women who say that they're victims who are going to have to give evidence all over again, who are already traumatised.
That's what happens a lot in where these rape trials are tried again, are appealed, because women don't want to go through what already was a massive ordeal and took so much courage and bravery to stand up the first time and say what happened to them, and they're just not up for doing it again. So it feels like these women have been let down once by Hollywood, once by Weinstein and the whole culture, and then again in this court of law. And I think people will see, on the flip side to what Emma said, instead of this being a demonstration of a robust legal system, this seems like the legal system's falling apart, because how on earth could it be that this could be thrown out on what seems to people who don't know much about the legal system a tiny little technicality?
It wasn't quite a tiny technicality. The New York Court of Appeal said prosecutors in the case called witnesses whose accusations were not part of the charges.
More witnesses, in fact, than those who were actually involved in the case.
But I think if you were one of those women and you'd step forward, given your evidence, and it had been received how it was, and then that was dismissed.
Well, it's similar
but
to...
he also wasn't able to have his day in court, in the sense that I don't think he actually took the stand in the end, because because of some of these complexities around the trial. So it's not just a small technicality if it undermines the fairness of the trial
and yet
overall, and undermines the verdict.
Lawyers for 8 of his accusers, one lawyer says that courts routinely admit evidence of other uncharged acts, and the jury was instructed on the relevance of this testimony. So what happened in the trial was nothing new that isn't done in other hearings.
It was because, and a lawyer would be able to explain this much better than I can, but it's something to do with demonstrating a pattern of behaviour. And because of the nature of those victims, or the witnesses even, their relationships with Weinstein, it wasn't enough to establish a pattern of behaviour that would be relevant in the case. I know this all sounds very technical. I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not the right person to explain it. But there were very serious fundamental flaws in the trial. And yes, I mean, in a sense, Amy is right that, and I think this goes to a bigger point, that they have also let down, we can say victims, potential victims. They've also let down the women, because this trial wasn't a fair trial, it didn't stand up. So it's important in terms of our trust also in the judgments that are being made in these cases, that we know that the trials were conducted properly.
Amy, he's serving another sentence in Los Angeles for further sex crimes. Now, this appeal being overturned could help him when it comes to appealing the sentencing in Los Angeles, the conviction. Well, I mean, he could potentially be a free man.
Be a free man in his 80s. I mean, he's still going to serve that 16-year sentence in Los Angeles.
Not if it's overturned.
That one could be overturned, but I think it's incredibly unlikely now. But if that were the case, I mean, it means he will walk free from these crimes, which is just. This is why people are feeling so outraged by it, because this just seems like the ultimate injustice for these women.
The thing is that the purpose of a trial is to establish the truth, and you therefore have to have trust in the process being done properly. If it is the case that the sentence in Los Angeles is overturned, which I think is very unlikely, then you can't say that he's guilty of those crimes because the truth hasn't been established by the cases. And this is, again, it goes back to the problem of the relationship in America between law and politics, that if courts feel pressured to do the wrong thing and therefore prejudice a trial, then people can't have trust in the system. They can't have trust that those trials have actually established the truth.
Yeah. OK, should we squeeze one more story in? A really interesting one about John Lewis is seeking to ease job interview nerves by revealing questions to applicants online beforehand. This is in the Financial Times. I think this is a bit of a cop-out. If you can't handle the pressure of a job interview and don't know what's coming, how are you going to handle the pressure of and the challenges of a real-life working situation?
Well, because not all jobs involve that type of pressure. So I think this will just level out the playing field for people from all different backgrounds. Not at all, because that...
If you're not qualified for the job or up for it, you shouldn't be applying for it.
But it's job interviews don't always reflect the role, do they? So this is about people from neurodiverse backgrounds having the same chance as somebody who is quick-witted or quick-minded to answer questions. Because a lot of these jobs would be, say, a tech job, where your ability to answer a question quickly under pressure isn't relevant to the role. So it's giving everyone a lot more of an opportunity, which is why recruiters are absolutely for this and think it's going to set a precedent across employment for the future.
Recruiters are for it because there's a talent shortage and they obviously want more people to get jobs, which means they get a bigger slice of the commission, right, Emma?
If you've rehearsed your answers over and over and over in front of the mirror, are you really going to be seen at your authentic best, Emma?
Well, they're not going to know, really, whether or not the person is the right person for the job, I don't think. But I think this is a massive mistake because human beings are... We're often made out to be these fragile creatures, but actually human beings are anti-fragile. We need resistance in our lives. We need things to go up against. And actually, if you suffer with bad nerves, as I think many people who are watching this will have experienced themselves, the best thing to do is to face it, to push back against it, to fight against those nerves and to put yourselves in those uncomfortable situations. So mollycoddling people in this way is not going to be good for them and it's going to be really bad for business.
It's not mollycoddling.
It is mollycoddling.
It's observing that there's a diversity of brains that respond differently and some need to prepare for questions to be able to showcase their best ability.
It's like exams and coursework.
Well, yeah, and people do completely differently.
It's like cheating.
I agree with you. Just, dare I say it again, man up. Life is hard, life is tough. Challenge yourself,
you won't get the best
grow,
people for the jobs.
experience failure, learn from your mistakes, enjoy your triumphs, better yourself. Life isn't just to be wrapped in cotton wool and given the answers.
I think people need to have more faith in themselves rather than always being told they're fragile all the time. People should be told you can do this. And if anyone is watching this, if you are too nervous to go to a job interview, do it. Feel uncomfortable because it will make you feel better for having done it.
And your next one, you'll be fine.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You've got to do things in order to get good.
Failure is good.
We are powerful creatures.
What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Go for it.
There we go. There's your morning pep talk. £5 in the post, please. Cheaper than a therapist.
Thank you very much to our two therapists, Emma and Amy. We will be seeing you, of course, in the next hour. But let's get a roundup of your latest headlines now with Sophia.
Pip, thank you. It's 10:31. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB Newsroom. 2 men have been charged with immigration offences after the deaths of 5 migrants, including a young girl, who were trying to cross the English Channel. Yian Both, who's 22 and from South Sudan, and Tajdeen Abdulaziz Yuma, who's also 22 and from Sudan, were both charged with offences related to the deadly incident. An 18-year-old Sudanese man was bailed pending further inquiries. The 5 migrants were on one of several packed boats that pushed off from the beach of Wimereux in France on Tuesday morning. Scotland's First Minister is facing a leadership contest after his former allies in the Scottish Greens said they'll vote against him in a motion of no confidence. The decision follows the collapse of the SNP's power-sharing deal with the Greens yesterday, leaving Mr Youssef in charge of a minority government. A vote against Mr Youssef wouldn't automatically end his first term as First Minister, but it would throw doubt over his ability to govern. A former parliamentary researcher has been ordered not to contact MPs after he was charged with spying for China. Christopher Cash, who's 29, and 32-year-old Christopher Berry are accused of offences under the Official Secrets Act. The pair appeared at Westminster Magistrates' Court this morning, but were not required to enter any pleas. And the world's first personalised vaccine for skin cancer is being tested on British patients. It works by telling the body to hunt down cancer cells and also has the potential to stop lung, bladder and kidney cancers. The jab uses the same technology as the COVID vaccines and is designed to trigger the body's immune system. And for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2522 and €1.1659. The price of gold is £1,878 and 81 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100's at 8,108 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. In Edinburgh, the A90 Queensferry Road is partly blocked eastbound by an accident at Barnton, causing delays heading into the city from Crammon Brig. In Antrim on the A2 Shore Road at White Abbey, it's down to a single lane each way after an accident by the Methodist Church, causing queues. On the A1M in North Yorkshire, there's a lane closed northbound where a vehicle caught fire between junctions 51 and 52 from Leeming Bar to Catterick. It's slow towards and past there. There are a couple of accidents in Suffolk on the A14. It's partly blocked westbound between junctions 46 and 45 towards Bury St Edmunds, causing delays from junction 47. The A14 also partly blocked eastbound by an accident between junctions 54 and 55 towards the A12 near Ipswich, with queues from junction 53. And in London on the A13, there's a lane closed westbound where a lorry's broken down just after the Beckton flyover, causing queues. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Sadiq Khan has been accused once again of plotting to bring in a pay-per-mile charging scheme in London, after a Labour councillor said it was only ruled out for now. A spokesperson for Conservative mayoral candidate Susan Hall told GB News the mask has slipped and Sadiq Khan's plans for pay-per-mile are as clear as day. The only way to get the ULEZ expansion scrapped and to stop Sadiq Khan's pay-per-mile plans is to vote for me on May the 2nd. Khan has faced significant backlash for his ULEZ expansion, which saw the scheme extended to cover Outer London. He has previously ruled out introducing pay-per-mile in London, accusing Susan Hall's team of spreading misinformation around the issue. However, Sadiq Khan's transport strategy appears to commit the mayor to conducting a review of road user charging schemes, which could involve the introduction of a pay-per-mile style levy. The strategy report was published in 2018 and revised in 2022. It says these could replace schemes such as the congestion charge, low emission zone and the ULEZ. In doing so, the Mayor will consider the appropriate technology for any future schemes, and the potential for a future scheme that reflects distance, time, emissions, road danger, and other factors in an integrated way. Last week, a spokesman for Mr Khan said, "This is an absolute nonsense from a Tory party desperate to distract from their 14 years of failure and is categorically untrue." Sadiq has definitively ruled out Pay Per Mile. Pay Per Mile was first proposed in Boris Johnson's transport strategy when he was mayor. Nicholas Dunning, GB News.
Welcome back. Now, MPs are warning that any failure to move people to universal credit from older legacy benefits will cause real-world misery for thousands.
The Public Accounts Committee's report says the Department for Work and Pensions must ensure it helps vulnerable claimants so they don't lose their benefits.
The committee said the Department of Work and Pensions expected around 4% of claimants on legacy benefits would not make the switch to universal credit.
We're joined now by Chief Economic Advisor at the Centre for Economic and Business Research, Vicky Price. Good morning, Vicky. What does this mean then for people who are claiming benefits? Do you know roughly how many people could be affected and the kind of figures we're dealing with?
Well, the interesting thing is that there are around 6 million people who are claiming universal credit, which is, of course, the new benefit which has replaced quite a lot of those legacy benefits which are still in existence. So lots of people have already moved to those, or when they're starting to claim, then they go straight into universal credit. So at least, you know, what we've seen is the reduction of the number of people who are on all those older benefits still. But there are a number, about 2 million or just over, who are still on those legacy payments. And the way in which the Department for Work and Pensions is doing it is it's transferring people gradually over to universal credit by sending letters around and encouraging people to do so. But not everyone either opens the letters, realizes that it's for them, really. They think it's going to be automatic anyway. So there is this real danger that those people, the over 2 million people that who are meant to be moving into that over the next couple of years are likely to be left behind, or some of them anyway. And they think that a certain percentage will be left behind. And also there is a problem of the in-between. If you don't transfer, you lose benefits over a period of time. And then, of course, you have to catch up.
Yeah, so people really need to be on it, don't they? And I saw one statistic that said nearly £19 billion in benefits goes unclaimed every single year.
Wow.
Well, it's really interesting. It's partly because of what we've just been talking about. But there is also another counterbalancing factor, which is that DWP tends to overpay benefits. And then you've got to pay them back somehow when they realize that this is the case. So there is a sort of balancing factor there. But yes, people don't claim. They're not aware that they have to, or they find it difficult to even get through the process of doing so. And as things change, as you move from one benefit to another, it just complicates things even further. And it is very important that they do claim, because if you look at how much people are getting on universal credit, say, and on general benefits, what you find is that universal credit itself is only about 13%, according to the Joseph Rowntree Foundation and Trussell Trust, of average earnings. So it's very little. And for a number of people, even what they get per week doesn't cover their essential items.
Vicky, maybe I'm just being a bit ignorant on this topic, but surely if people aren't being paid enough in their benefits, they can't survive the week. I mean, where do we get to a situation where people aren't aware they're not being paid enough?
Well, you've already seen, of course, the increase in food banks, and lots of people are relying on that. But what the government claims is that if you are on universal credit, because remember, universal credit is paid also if you're at work and your income is below a certain level that you're getting from work, that it actually does encourage you to go back to work. So they find that people on universal credit are more likely to then go back to work than they were on the previous legacy benefits. So I think one of the reasons behind it was encourage people to go back to work, and we pay them even if their income is low and make up, if you like, of that for that. But overall, yes, I think it is a serious problem. And what you've seen is that there has been an increase in poverty among children, for example. I mean, all these facts are there to show that over the last few years, that element has really been affected quite substantially. And also, of course, as you probably know, there is a 2-child sort of benefit cap. So people get a lot less extra money if they have loads of children. That, of course, possibly is an encouragement to just focus on the ones you already have and not encourage people to have many more if they can't afford them. But I think that has hit quite a lot of people. And there is also a benefit cap, which is still there. So even if you get lots of benefits, the thing is that you can't get all those benefits above a certain level. So that also affects you quite significantly. So the general point is those things are done in a way to encourage you to go back to work. And we do know there is a huge amount of inactivity going on. The question, of course, is what happens in between when you have lots of people who perhaps fall into as a result of this.
Vicky, on a completely separate topic, with regards to the global economy, the inflation has unexpectedly grown in the US, according to latest figures. The Federal Reserve now coy on reducing interest rates as the market had expected. What does that mean for mortgage interest rates here and the Bank of England with their base rate?
There is a concern. We were waiting, of course, for the Fed to make the first move. The general expectation was the US would go first and then all the others would follow, or perhaps it would be coordinated. Now, if the US takes longer, then the question is what's going to happen here and also what's going to happen in Europe. My expectation is that nevertheless, here in the UK and in Europe, because the economic condition is very different, we're not growing that fast, nothing like as fast as the US, that we might see cuts coming first and the US would follow later.
OK, fantastic. Vicky Price, thank you very much. You're the Chief Economic Advisor at the Centre for Economic and Business Research. Of course you are. Thank you, Vicky.
OK, let's get some of your views. And we've had lots of them in this morning, particularly on this GB News poll, where people are saying on the old email that they wouldn't vote Labour if you paid me. That's from Jerry. Claire, I wouldn't trust Labour to look after my puppy, let alone the country. Yes, poor working class... I don't understand that. Yes, us working class want our taxes hiked up and a country still bankrupt in 5 years, then of course Labour is who you would vote. But I prefer my hard work ethic.
Yeah, so, and Sue, you say, I'm a GB News member and did not know about this poll. I certainly do not see Labour as a better option and definitely will not be voting for them. I also don't feel Conservatives will return to power either. That leaves me in a quandary of who to vote for. We need a decision from Nigel Farage of what his intentions are. Who knows? He said a couple of weeks back that he'd make his announcement in a couple of weeks' time, whether he'd stick in broadcasting on GB News or whether he'd get back into the Reform UK fold. But he'll
leave it till the 11th hour.
Yeah, still make up his mind.
And Ronald, you say, I cannot understand why anyone would want to vote Labour or Conservative. Both have failed the people repeatedly, and yet good old Britons seem unable to get off the roundabout of repeatedly voting for failure.
And Claire, good morning to you. You say, I wouldn't trust Labour to look after my puppy.
I've said that one.
Oh, have you?
But say it again, it's fine.
I thought it was
Puppies actually need a lot of looking after.
Wasn't listening to you. Sorry, Pip. Doing a typical man.
You're not the first. You're not the first man not to listen to me, Ben. You won't be the last. We'd love to hear what you think. Do send us your views and post your comments by visiting gbnews.com/your say.
Yeah, keep them coming. Up next, disgraced Hollywood film producer Harvey Weinstein has had his 2020 New York rape conviction overturned. We've already spoken to the panel about that. We're going to get some in-depth legal expertise on it to see what it means for his future. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Ben and Pip. Stay with us.
Hello, good morning. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update. It's going to be another fairly cloudy and rather cool day, and there's a few showers around for some. But for the time being, should stay fairly dry and bright through the rest of the morning, particularly across north and western areas of the country. Clouds going to bubble up though as we head towards lunchtime, and the risk of showers starts to develop. Though I think many areas across the north should stay fairly dry. Now, towards the south, we start to see cloud thicken through this afternoon across many areas of Wales, into parts of the Midlands and across the south coast ahead of this showery band of rain that will push up northwards throughout tonight. And temperatures will be well below average for the time of year. So another fairly cool day today. Cloud will tend to fade away across northern areas through this evening, so it will be a clear and dry night once again across many areas of northern England, Northern Ireland, much of Scotland, and there is a risk of a further frost for Saturday morning. Across the south, though, cloud will continue to thicken as this band of showery rain continues to move northwards, but that will introduce some milder air, so it's not going to be quite as cold across southern areas of England and Wales through this evening. Now, it will be a bright but cold start across the north on Saturday. The best of the sunshine is likely to be in the morning. I think as you head towards the afternoon, cloud will bubble up once again, and there's a risk of a few showers. But again, most areas should stay dry. Across the Midlands, though, cloud will really thicken. It's going to be quite a dull afternoon, and temperatures will be suppressed. And in the south, any brighter spells that develop could pep off a few showers.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's election channel. And from Thursday, the 2nd of May,
the people decide.
As the country heads to the polls in a rush of elections, we'll take you through the night as the first results come in.
And we'll pick up at breakfast
with the very best guests and analysis.
And on the weekend, the results won't stop, and neither will we.
We'll explore what it all means for you as we look ahead to the general election.
Continuing coverage live from Thursday, the 2nd of May at midnight on GB News.
Welcome back. We're going to talk now about that landmark legal ruling where former Hollywood film producer Harvey Weinstein has had his 2020 rape conviction overturned in New York due to a crucial mistake made by the trial judge.
Yes, so the courts found he did not receive a fair trial after the judge called witnesses whose accusations were not part of the case against him. So Weinstein was found guilty of raping and sexually assaulting 2 women, but is now entitled to a retrial.
Well, earlier, GB News spoke to showbiz reporter Stephanie Tecci about this.
Weinstein was sentenced in 2020. Many people saw that as actually a victory for the Me Too movement. You know, finally he's been locked away. He's not going to be a free man, so he's still already in prison, serving another sentence for 16 years. But the fact that now this has been overturned, actually, it's said to a lot of women, actually, your stories don't matter, even if you're going to court to talk about it. With Harvey Weinstein, in his defence, his team are quite happy with this verdict because it means actually he can actually now go on trial and have his say, because during the trial he didn't really get a chance to say his side of the story. So now if there is going to be a retrial, he will get to say what happened in these kind of situations that he's been accused of.
So let's unpack this a little bit more with broadcaster and lawyer Andrew Eborn, who knows the American legal system. So, Andrew, just explain to us then, simply, about why it was decided that he didn't get a fair trial. Because, of course, victims' lawyers, his accusers' lawyers, are saying that's completely untrue, and courts routinely admit evidence of other uncharged acts.
Absolutely, and what's really important is shed more light and less heat on the subject, because it's horrendous for the victims. A number of people have come forward. The basic law is this, is that everybody's entitled to a fair trial. What that means is certain evidence is allowed in a court and certain evidence isn't. And it varies around the world. So, for example, this particular case, what they held, and we only ever get the headlines in the media. They only say, oh, they've let him off. Well, that's not what happens. Everybody's innocent until proven guilty. There is a due process that needs to be followed as to evidence. And the evidence which is relevant is that which is part of that particular accusation. So you say, well, does it relate to this particular crime? And if it does, to prove that, that's what's going to happen. What happened in this particular case, the judge on appeal, they found that there were egregious errors because certain evidence from various other people was admitted. And what they said is that we conclude that the trial court erroneously admitted testimony of uncharged alleged prior sexual acts against persons other than the complainants. So in other words, if it happened to somebody else, they're basically saying it happened to this particular victim.
But complainants' lawyers say that is a regular thing that happens in court.
The evidence says it has to basically be, what has this got to do with this particular case? If somebody, for example, had a history of stealing, they stole a Mars bar from a particular corner shop, I know it's trivial, but you get the point. They stole a Mars bar. It doesn't necessarily mean they stole a Mars bar in the case they're accused of. So what happened here is that he hadn't been convicted of these offences with these other people who were put forward as witnesses. All that had happened is they came forward to look at that sort of side.
Well, we have that here in the UK, don't we? Defendants, a jury in a trial are not told about defendants' past criminal history because it may influence their decision.
Absolutely, and that's the important thing. And it's very easy and it's gut reaction because they're such appalling crimes. And the victim stories are so compelling that we basically become judged in the media. We turn around and say, it must be awful, how dare they let him off? The reality is everybody's entitled to a fair trial. It needs to go through due process. Now, that due process is different on a state-by-state basis. I know you were talking about what happens in California could be different to New York.
So he's serving a 16-year sentence in Los Angeles for sex crimes. So will this give his legal team there renewed impetus to try and get that overturned?
Well, they will have impetus anyway, so they will turn around. Or lawyers are always looking for that sort of stuff. It's always about evidence. It's about, has this gone through the due process? And the difficulty, as I say, is the headlines can be quite misleading because you don't get all the hours and days, sometimes months of testimony which goes into this. So the courts have to decide, is it fair? It's essential. It's a fundamental right, human right, that everybody's entitled to a fair trial, however horrendous the crime is. That, or the alleged crime. So that needs to happen. What they have is what's called propensity. And the propensity laws in California are different to what they are in New York. They're a bit more lax. So if somebody says there's a particular pattern of behaviour, they might offer that, and it depends on the judge. They have more discretion as to what evidence they need to do. But the key and the headline is you must follow that process. If you don't follow that process, then you're opening yourself up to appeal, which is what happened in this case.
Could this mean in future, though, that actually, because of course it was the Weinstein case that sparked the whole Me Too movement, has it not set it back? Does this not end up discouraging complainants from coming forward because they don't think they'll be listened?
Oh, no, they will absolutely be heard, and not at all. It's essential that people come forward and talk about things. What they have to do, though, and lawyers need to make sure that they follow the due process. You don't want to make sure there's an argument for the other side to turn around and say the evidence which was admitted was not right. So you need to follow that. That's the thing. In this particular case, and it was held on appeal, those are the findings as a fact, that this evidence should not have been admitted, and as a result of it admitting it, he didn't get a fair trial. I suspect it will go for a retrial, and then there'll be arguments there, well, hang about, it's all been in the media and everything, he may not get a fair trial again, is what they will argue. But the reality is this, you have to follow process, and people who are victims should come forward.
OK, well, I mean, that's why this case is important, because Weinstein was the catalyst for the Me Too movement, which brought a lot of prosecutions this side of the pond as well. But coming up, we're going to be breaking down more of today's headlines with our panel, including that news about Captain Tom's house being sold by his daughter. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Ben and Pip. Stay with us.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good morning. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update. It's going to be another fairly cloudy and rather cool day, and there's a few showers around for some. But for the time being, should stay fairly dry and bright through the rest of the morning, particularly across north and western areas of the country. Clouds going to bubble up, though, as we head towards lunchtime and the risk of showers starts to develop. Though I think many areas across the north should stay fairly dry. Now, towards the south, we start to see clouds thicken through this afternoon across many areas of Wales, into parts of the Midlands and across the south coast ahead of this showery band of rain that will push up northwards throughout tonight. And temperatures will be well below average for the time of year. So another fairly cool day today. Cloud will tend to fade away across northern areas through this evening, so it will be a clear and dry night once again across many areas of northern England, Northern Ireland, much of Scotland, and there is a risk of a further frost for Saturday morning. Across the south, though, cloud will continue to thicken as this band of showery rain continues to move northwards, but that will introduce some milder air, so it's not going to be quite as cold across southern areas of England and Wales through this evening. Now, it will be a bright but cold start across the north on Saturday. The best of the sunshine is likely to be in the morning. I think as you head towards the afternoon, cloud will bubble up once again, and there's a risk of a few showers, but again, most areas should stay dry. Across the Midlands, though, cloud will really thicken. It's going to be quite a dull afternoon, and temperatures will be suppressed. And in the south, any brighter spells that develop could pep off a few showers.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
the final week to see how you could win our biggest prize yet. There's an incredible £10,000 in tax-free cash to spend however you like. Plus, courtesy of Variety Cruises, a bespoke 7-night small boat cruise for two worth £10,000. With flights, meals, excursions and drinks included, your next holiday could be on us. Choose any one of their 2025 Greek adventures and find your home at sea. We'll also send you packing with these luxury travel gifts. Hurry, as lines close on Friday. For another chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And why it matters to you. From your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you. Good afternoon, Britain. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. 2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria DiPiero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Very good morning to you. It's 11 a.m. on Friday, April the 26th. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with me, Ben Leo, and Pip Thompson.
GB viewers vote Labour, or do you? A GB News exclusive poll finds that support for Labour has soared ahead of the Conservatives, but lots of you are saying the polls don't speak for us.
And it's the first payday since the Tory tax changes, but Labour say they are the party to protect family finances. Do you agree?
SNP in crisis. Humza Yousaf cancels a planned speech as he battles for political survival. The First Minister faces a vote of no confidence next week after ripping up his coalition agreement with the Greens.
And the Rwanda bill, now law. The scheme has passed after months of deadlock, but Ireland now says it's already feeling the brunt, with the country's deputy PM saying they're receiving an influx of migrants.
Keep sending in all your thoughts this morning.
I was just going to say, sorry to interrupt, Ireland talking about Rwanda already having a bad effect on migration. They've been opening their borders pretty much with uncontrolled mass migration for a long, long time. Many native Irish people very, very upset with the government and their migration policies over there. So it's a bit rich and cheap, if you ask me, to blame Rwanda, which only passed, 2 days ago, and hasn't even been implemented yet. So anyway, let us know what you think. gbnews.com/your say. Lots more to come, including that Captain Tom story as well.
Yeah, his family have put their house up for sale. They want more than $2 million for it. But what's interesting is that in the brochure, they seem to be using his name his memory to try and clinch that sale.
Oh,
is that right thing to do, or is it understandable?
Poor Captain Tom. Let us know what you think. Anyway, before all that, here's your news headlines with Sophia.
Ben, thank you. Good morning. It's 2 minutes past 11. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB Newsroom. Scotland's First Minister has cancelled a planned speech on independence as he faces a leadership contest next week. It's after the collapse of the SNP's power-sharing deal with the Greens yesterday, leaving Humza Yousaf in charge of a minority government. The Greens are said to have been angered by Scotland's NHS pausing puberty blockers for those under 18 and the abandonment of the country's emissions target. A vote against Mr Yousaf wouldn't automatically end his term as First Minister, but it would throw doubt over his ability to govern. A former parliamentary researcher has been ordered not to contact MPs after he was charged with spying for China. Christopher Cash, who's 29, and 32-year-old Christopher Berry are accused of offences under the Official Secrets Act. The pair appeared at Westminster Magistrates Court this morning, but were not required to enter any pleas. 2 men have been charged with immigration offences after the deaths of 5 migrants, including a young girl who were trying to cross the English Channel. Yiyen Both, who's 22, from South Sudan, and Tajdeen Abdulaziz Juma, who's also 22 and from Sudan, were both charged with offences related to the deadly incident. An 18-year-old Sudanese man was bailed pending further inquiries. The 5 migrants were on one of the several packed boats that pushed off from the beach of Wimereux in France on Tuesday morning. In the US, the actress Ashley Judd says the overturning of Harvey Weinstein's rape conviction is an institutional betrayal. Her allegation of sexual assault by the Hollywood producer helped spark the Me Too movement. A major film star in the 1990s, she sued Weinstein in 2018, claiming he damaged her career after she rejected his advances. His 2020 rape conviction was overturned yesterday after a New York court ruled that he didn't receive a fair trial. The district attorney will now determine whether to seek a retrial, though he remains in prison on other crimes. Ashley Judd says the courts haven't served the needs of victims.
This today is an act of institutional betrayal. And our institutions betray survivors of male sexual violence. I stand shoulder to shoulder with women who have bloody knees. Because male sexual violence may knock us down, but we get right back up. And together we are in this struggle for freedom from male entitlement to our bodies.
The world's first personalised vaccine for skin cancer has begun testing on British patients. It works by telling the body to hunt down cancer cells and prevent the deadly disease from coming back, and also has the potential to stop lung, bladder and kidney cancers. The jab uses the same technology as the COVID vaccines and is designed to trigger the body's immune system. Teacher Steve Young was the first person to take part in the groundbreaking clinical trial.
I had any fear because by doing the trial, I feel like I'm actively doing something to give it a kicking, basically.
Now, Labour says that any benefits from recent changes to tax have been wiped out by rising inflation. The party's analysis shows costs for working households are nearly £8,000 higher each year. It found the average weekly budget for a typical household is up by £150, with everyday things like utility bills, food, petrol and clothes seeing a spike in cost. The government says its economic plan is working and inflation is coming down. But Shadow Business Secretary Jonathan Reynolds says families aren't feeling the benefits.
The government to say, well, we've turned a corner, we've got there. Look, I judge how inflation's doing. I'm at home today, I'm talking to you from my home in Stalybridge. I go to Stalybridge Tesco and I see the price of ketchup, of cereal. I mean, this is what really matters to people. And it is gone up to a degree that no one's going to be feeling, the good times are back when they get their pay packet this week with a few pence off national insurance.
And MI5 is warning foreign states are targeting UK universities to undermine national security. Vice-chancellors from 24 leading universities have been alerted to the threat. The government and security services are worried that cutting-edge research could be targeted by foreign states to boost their own militaries and economies. The Deputy Prime Minister has announced a consultation on measures to protect Britain's universities. And for the latest story, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Ben and Pip.
Welcome back. It's 11:07. Ben and Pip with you on Britain's Newsroom. Just going to read you two very quick messages from our members on gbnews.com/your say. Norfolk Skies. Good morning to you, Norfolk. You say Captain Tom, he was a marvellous, honourable man, and he would be very disappointed with how things have turned out for his daughter after he died. And Martin Spartan, good morning. You say, why not use a famous name to help the sale of his house? If Shakespeare had lived there, would you mention that? I'm sure the captain wouldn't mind helping his daughter. Thanks for those. We're going to get stuck into that just a second, aren't we, with
Although
Amy
there wasn't
and...
quite so much scandal attached to Shakespeare, if any.
No.
Not quite the right comparison.
But I guess the point is not of Captain Tom's doing.
No,
all this happened
not.
after he died with his daughter.
Let's talk now about this exclusive GB News poll, which is winding some of you up this morning, actually, according to all the messages. It's found that support for Labour has gone up by 13% in the last 5 years. But many of you are saying you don't agree. Would you vote Labour? Let's break down the findings.
So, poll participants voted Labour on top, with 39% saying they would vote for Labour at the general election, with the Tories a fairly close second at 28%, Reform at 20%, and the Lib Dems, my oh my, only at 6%.
On to crime, and 72% of you think the government is not tough enough on crime, with only 7% saying they are. 19% are sitting on the fence and 2% don't know.
And on the NHS, 66% of you say the government should spend more money on the health service. 19% say they should keep things as they are, and 12% think the government should spend less, and 3% of you said you don't know.
On immigration, 73% of you say immigration is too high, with only 4% of you saying it's too low.
I want to meet the 4% of you who think it's too low. Very interesting. Finally, we've got your thoughts on whether to remain in the ECHR. 49% of you think Britain should remain in the ECHR. 36% of you think we should not, we should leave, and 15% don't know.
Well, joining us now is GB News' political correspondent, Olivia Utley. Olivia, lots of answers there. What do you think the takeaway is from this?
Well, it's pretty bad news for the Prime Minister. Rishi Sunak probably would have thought that a demographic that he could rely on would be GB News viewers, who are thought to be big C conservative-minded. Well, that doesn't seem to be true at all, at least according to this poll. Labour is more trusted on all sorts of issues, from the NHS to housing. Housing is known to be a real weakness of this government. There was also quite a lot of criticism for the current government, particularly in terms of crime. An astonishing 72% think that the Conservatives aren't doing enough to tackle crime. And that is an issue which traditionally the Conservatives would be very strong on. So this is all-round bad news for the Prime Minister. The glimmer of hope is that the Conservatives are still more trusted on tackling illegal migration. And obviously illegal migration is an issue which lots of people feel very, very strongly about. On surveys about what concerns people most with issues pertaining to the UK, illegal immigration normally comes out at 1 or 2. And Rishi Sunak is hoping that now his Rwanda legislation is over the line and flights are due to be taking off in the next 6 to 10 weeks, the Conservatives should see trust on that issue increasing and potentially a little bump in the polls. But that bump in the polls cannot come soon enough for Rishi Sunak. The local elections are next week, and everyone is expecting the Conservatives to be absolutely decimated, and that would result in very low morale in the party and a knock-on effect into the general election later this year.
Olivia, what do you think will happen to Rishi Sunak if and when they are decimated at the local elections? Is he going to hang tough?
Well, I think that if the polling bears out and the local election results are really, really damaging for the Conservatives, I think we can expect to see a few letters of no confidence in the Prime Minister start to trickle in. At the moment, there are only 2 Conservative MPs who have actually come forward and said that they would like to see the back of Rishi Sunak. That's Simon Clarke and Andrea Jenkins. But I think if those results are really, really bad, lots of MPs who sort of think, well, you changing the leader at the last minute is the worst worst of all worlds might change their mind and think, actually, no, now is the moment for a final roll of the dice. And if that happens, even if it doesn't get anywhere near the sort of threshold that it would take to actually trigger a vote of no confidence in the Prime Minister, we could end up in a situation where Rishi Sunak says, well, OK, if this is the situation that I'm in, then now's maybe the moment for me to step aside. I still think that the most likely scenario is that Sunak leads the party into the general election, but ask me again in a couple of weeks.
We will. Olivia Utley, political correspondent, thank you very much.
And some of you in recent days, weeks rather, may have noticed more pounds in your pocket. Maybe not. That's as the Tories' budget tax cuts kick in. But will we really be better off with a Labour government? That's the question. Joining us now is Greg Marsh, cost of living commentator and founder of CEO of Nows. Good morning to you. Are people really feeling better off in recent weeks and months? We've had tax cuts and national insurance cuts, but, I mean, does that translate to feeling more abundant?
Yeah, it's a little bit of a balanced picture, and it does depend on how much you earn. Middle income earners, so folks between about 23 and 50 or so £1,000 a year of income, will, from the 6th of April, benefit from this 2p in the pound cut to national insurance tax rates. The effect of that for someone on that kind of salary range is likely to be equivalent to about £500 more a year. That's good news. What you have to offset against that, and the reason it isn't more, is because a lot of the costs of other things, of course, continue to rise. Inflation now at 3.2%, so down from those really high numbers we were experiencing this time last year. But still, even though inflation's falling, prices haven't, which means that not only is the cost of everything higher than it was last year and the year before, but the cumulative effect of those price rises is that many people feel poorer. We all feel like we have less money at the end of the month, even if some of us, those in that fortunate sort of middle income bracket, have a bit more in their pocket at the end of each month. So it's a mixed picture. And unfortunately, until some more of the benefits of falling inflation and a perkier economy filter through into people's wallets, it's hard to believe that it's going to be showing up at the ballot box.
Inflation, as you say, now 3.2%. It was 3.4%. Do you think it's going to take longer to get down to that 1% figure?
In the UK, in the US for that matter as well, there is a sense that inflation's proving very sticky, more so than economists had predicted, more so than the Bank of England had predicted and, of course, hoped for. Until inflation starts falling, and I mean falling back to its target, which, of course, is 2%, a long way from more than 3%, until it falls back to that 2% target, it's unlikely the Bank of England will feel confident enough to start lowering interest rates. Interest rates, remember, what really matters if you're in debt, if you've got credit card bills, or for that matter, a mortgage. People who put a fixed rate mortgage deal in place 2 years ago, and roughly 1 million households in the UK who'll be refinancing that mortgage over the next 12 months, are expecting to see their costs for servicing their mortgage rise very sharply because of those higher interest rates. So the critical question is not just what is inflation, but does the Bank of England believe that inflation is going to fall fast enough and far enough to give them confidence to drop interest rates? Now, unless that happens, the cost of everything continues to rise and none of us feel rich. And so that's the challenge, again, not just in the ballot box, but also for all of us at the end of each month when we're trying to make ends meet.
Greg, I mean, has the Bank of England and also the Federal Reserve in the US, have they got any credibility left? Because when they were printing untold amounts of money out of thin air during COVID, I mean, the US, for example, printed a third of their entire USD money supply in just 12 months. And they were saying it's not going to cause inflation. Then it was, oh, inflation's just transitionary. And now they're accepting that, you know, inflation's out of control. So how can we take the Bank of England and the Fed seriously? They don't seem to know what they're doing.
Forecasting is always very difficult, especially in respect of the future. But having said that, the Bank of England's forecasts haven't always been great. In fact, one of the sharpest criticisms of the central bank by observers has been that they have been consistently a bit too optimistic. They were too optimistic about how much inflation would rise, and they've been too optimistic so far about how quickly it will fall. And that means it's one of the reasons why the markets now are only predicting 2 interest rates cuts, each of only 1/4 of a point, by the end of this year, again, from 5.25% to 4.75%. That is still much higher than that period of low interest rates that, as you allude to, that we've got used to. We got used to this idea that prices didn't rise very much, that the cost of money, the cost of borrowing was cheap. And of course, the consequence of that was for many, many years, for more than 2 decades, things like asset prices, house prices increased regularly because it was relatively easy to raise debt. Whether or not that epoch ever really returns, it's much too early to tell. And if it doesn't return, if we remain in this kind of medium inflation environment where interest rates have to remain elevated to try to discourage people from spending too much, that is a problem. It's a problem because it is going to affect us on the house prices, it's going to affect us in the high street, and it's going to affect consumer confidence. And that's the latter issue which Rishi Sunak and Jeremy Hunt are most concerned about in the approaching election, as of course are the US politicians, because Biden has a similar challenge if indeed interest rates and inflation doesn't fall in the US as fast as they hope.
OK, Greg, thanks very much. Oh, I think we might have just lost him just in time. Oh, he's still there. Thank you, Greg. Appreciate your expertise. Thank you. You know, the US dollar's lost its 99% of its value since 1913. And when you go around printing money out of thin air like it's candy, backed by nothing, the US dollar, of course, used to be backed by gold. Then they just decided to scrap that and, you know, print as and when you want. What do you think is going to happen? It doesn't take an economist or an expert. You don't need to work at the Bank of England or the Federal Reserve to know what was going to happen. But everyone seemed to know, apart from the most important people, unfortunately.
Stay with us here on Britain's Newsroom. The Rwanda plan is now law, but will it deter hundreds of people crossing in small boats over the channel?
You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News. Stick with us.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
I wonder, is this the fundamental distinction we need to make between Islam, which is a private religion people may practice freely amongst themselves, and Islamism, when you try and place those values upon other people, place that way of being, force it on people who don't want it?
Tom, I have been very much clear about this thing that Islam is a religion and people are free to follow that religion in the UK, in a free Western society. So we have no problem with people following their religion as long as it is not being imposed onto the wider society. And when you talk about drawing a distinction between Islam and Islamism, people like me, you and me, we are drawing that distinction. We're trying to maintain that distinction. But if you look at the commentator from the Muslim community, some commentator, they would like to blur this line and they would ask you, what is Islamism? Where does it exist? Sorry, it does exist. We see it. And the teacher, this incident is an epitome of that kind of, ideology being prevalent, in our society.
Khadija, do you worry that these views are typical for some sections of society? Do you think that there's a problem with some Muslim men, that they have perhaps views that we don't consider to be British values?
There are certain readings of religion which are misogynistic, which are discriminatory, which are homophobic. We need to be honest about it. We need to be calling it out whenever we hear these kind of views. It's been a long time that we are letting these kind of ideologies crawling in, spreading tentacles in British society, and we are just ignoring it in the name of respecting people's culture and religion. You are not suppressed in the UK.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me. My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter, with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country. That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Hello, welcome back. It's 11:21. You're with Ben and about to call you Bev. Sorry, Pip. Ben and Pip on Britain's Newsroom on GB News. We're joined by social commentator Amy Nicole-Turner and writer and broadcaster Emma Webb in the studio. Hello.
Hi.
Welcome back. A trio of good stories doing the rounds today. What would you like to start with, Amy?
Let's start with feminism.
Feminism.
It's important.
I'll sit this one out.
So, Petronella Wyatt, good friend of the channel, has done an opinion piece in The Telegraph entitled "Feminism has left middle-aged women like me single, childless and depressed." So she parks those three things which have affected her at the door of feminism. Whereas I would like to ask Petronella, what would the patriarchy have given you? And also to look to what feminism has given most other middle-aged women, you know, choice, bodily autonomy, opportunities. And I think that this is more about loneliness. It's an article about Petronella's loneliness, which is a problem that spans generations, spans genders, and I think for her to attribute it to feminism is slightly short-sighted.
OK.
Emma.
Told you I'm sitting this one out.
Do you agree?
No. I think that Petronella's article, I thought it was very powerful, actually. And I think that she's hitting on something that many women are experiencing. And I think the statistic was something like 1 in 10 women over the age of 50 without children and
But that doesn't
unmarried.
make you unhappy.
But it is a crisis of loneliness, and there are a lot of people who are.
You don't have to have children to cure loneliness.
No, but I think that she's making the argument that she's making is that. And lots of other people have made this argument too, that feminism sort of told women that they can have it all, that there's a certain sort of strand of feminism that led many women to think that they would find their fulfillment in being independent, in not settling down and having families, in pursuing a career first. And so what she's saying in this article isn't, as Amy was saying, she's not saying that life would be better under the patriarchy or life would be better the way that things once were. She acknowledges that women have gained something from feminism. But she also, I think, rightly recognises that there are some cultural downsides to what has become a de-emphasis on the importance of forming families and of that sort of the benefits of a more traditional life within the family.
She says feminism made the error of telling us to behave and think like men.
Which I think many women would acknowledge that there is a certain strand of feminist culture that has done that, and that it has led women to almost feel that they've been mugged by the culture because they felt that they were. And I also feel this as a kind of a late millennial, that there is this kind of cultural emphasis on career first, against motherhood, marriage, very antenatal, very much that your value comes from your career.
Is there not risk to just overthinking this? I mean, I don't have kids. It's not because I've necessarily pursued a career. It's just how my life has panned out.
Yeah.
And I've never been somebody who wanted or dreamed of the big white wedding, so I've never sort of pursued that. It's not because of feminism. It's just life and how life evolves.
Yeah, but you've also had the choice, you know, you can make a choice to have a career, whereas the women before us perhaps couldn't have had even that opportunity to have the career.
But I mean, she says at her school, at her private school, children of Thatcher were educated out of marriage. I went to a private girls' school. There was never any discussion about educating us out of marriage.
Exactly. But also, I think, like, marriage and children, they don't protect you from what she's ultimately saying is that she's feeling lonely and depressed.
You can feel very lonely and depressed in a marriage.
Exactly. So I think some of the loneliest people I know are people who are either married or have kids. But I think all this unhappiness is actually more of a product of individualism, pushing for individualism and alienating women rather than feminism.
I don't think that's a fair presentation of what the point that she's making in this article. And it does have something to do with individualism because it's also to do with atomisation. I mean, there's a crisis of loneliness across the board, also with young people, many more people living in single-person households. And she makes the point that also has an impact on people's health as well, that loneliness has all sorts of other effects. It's not just, mental health issues. But
there's a difference with feeling lonely and being alone.
I do think that you have to. I mean, lots of people often talk about lived experience and so on, but you do have to give some credence to the experiences of women who feel that they might have liked to have settled down and gotten married and had children, but they feel that they were encouraged to put their careers first because they were told that that was the right and the feminist thing to do. But actually there are now many younger women, which is also a point she makes in the article, who are pushing back against this, who are much more pro-natal, much more pro-marriage,
and that is
much more pro-prioritising those relationships over their careers.
But that is what feminism is, isn't it? It's about having the choice. So if you want to go and have 10 kids and get married and never work again, that's your choice. If you want to have a career and never have kids, live with a cat, that's your choice.
But if your culture denigrates motherhood and family and makes it seem like it's not a legitimate or noble choice to make, and there's no status attached to that compared with your status being entirely pegged on a career, then the culture does dissuade you from doing that, even if it's just
there is
in
no
a soft
So
way.
most women will still want to have children. What is stopping them? It's not feminism. It's the fact that we don't have enough money. It's capitalism and alienation that is stopping women from having children when they want.
I'm sorry. You can have kids. You can have kids without having money or having a house. I'd say just do it. Look, many other poorer third world countries do it. Just do it. I know there's obviously a high death rate of infants and whatever else, but if there's a will,
therefore it's not necessarily very sensible thing to do.
The global birth rate is plummeting. Japan in 70 years, if they don't start having kids, there'll be no Japanese people in a generation. Italy, birth rate is in the gutter. Our birth rate is in the gutter. There are obstacles to having kids: housing, wages, cost of living, etc., etc.
But if you're poor and in poverty, just still go and have a kid.
Yep, we have to. It's that Elon Musk says the falling birth rate is a bigger existential threat to humanity than climate change.
But it's also about fulfilment, because I think many women feel that they feel unfulfilled because they haven't done that, and they feel that the culture encouraged them not to, or the culture encouraged them to delay too long. And I think that's something important that we should be talking about as a society. I think it would be unwise of us to ignore those experiences.
Well, then the first thing we could do to not ignore that, I think, would make childcare affordable, make it possible that women can work and have kids, which is what most women
will
would
make it
probably
affordable for a family to survive on one person's salary.
There has been a choice, Amy, you're right, but as Emma alluded to, that choice has been coerced and influenced with the idea that you can have it all. You can have a career and then you can have kids. Maybe you can in some circumstances, but women, unfortunately, unlike men, they're against the clock. So when you get to your mid-30s, I'd argue that your ability to find a partner is much reduced. Many men are settled down.
Oh, come on, Ben. There's plenty of people way past the age of 50 who get married and settle down, or get married a second or third time.
I'm just saying, if you leave
You're suggesting that people in their mid-30s might have missed their chance to get married?
Yes.
But they might be.
Your pool of potential partners is, if you're not already hooked up with someone, is a lot shallower than it would be in your mid-20s.
If you get married in your mid-30s,
generalising.
If you get married in your mid-30s, and even me getting married as I will be this year at the age of 30, I mean, the later you get married, the less chance you have to have as many children as you might like to. And actually, there is a real problem, and there are statistics that show that women are not necessarily having as many children as they
You don't have to be married to have children.
And you can't plan these things either. Like, everybody thought when they were growing up, this is going to be my adulthood. Life doesn't work like that.
Yeah, I just think there's a bit of an agenda going around where it's anti-family, anti-kids. It's kind of like,
I don't think you should feel...
You can live your own life with as much abundance and joy as you want by yourself. You don't need anyone else, and then...
Don't need to have that much fragility about women having choices.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you're happy with the choice, fine. But I didn't want to get involved in this debate too much. People,
You have.
I have. I've been
Bulldoze straight in there.
But I would argue more women... No, I'm not going to say it. Anyway, that's it.
Not having children does not make you lonely. I don't feel like I've missed out at all because I don't have
actually,
kids.
some of my loneliest
I'm quite pleased I ain't got them.
Well, when I was a new mum. When I was a new single mum, it's some of my loneliest times of my life, so...
But there may be some women who do feel lonely and do feel that they wish that they'd settled down and had a family, and so you can't
I think they would think, oh, if only I got married, I wouldn't feel like this. But no, don't feel like that. Your loneliness is not because of that.
OK, very quickly, I just want your very quick thoughts, each of you, because we talked about this earlier. Captain Tom, his family selling their home. Are they using his name to sort of cash in? if you like.
That house is always going to be sold for more money just by virtue of the fact that it has a famous driveway.
Well, the one is that the one he did
that
the
he
laps?
walked around,
He did
of course.
Captain Tom's family, dodgy as hell, aren't they? That's all I can say on that. Didn't they
Well,
have to bulldoze the spa?
They're
Is
being
that house?
yeah, the house does not come with a spa complex because that no longer exists.
So that's probably taking a bit of valuation off that house. So.
I feel a bit sorry for Captain Tom because he did amazing stuff during COVID. He raised nearly 40 million quid by doing his laps, despite being however old he was. He was then packed off to Barbados for a holiday on the house someone gave him. He then got COVID and passed away, unfortunately. And since then, you know, all the furore with his daughter, building the spa, having to knock it down.
Well, there's allegations that the family profited from his name. I mean, they kept the proceeds, didn't they, of the book, or some of the proceeds of the book.
And now using his name to flog the house, which some of you don't care about, that's fine.
And I think the family always argue, don't they, that Captain Tom would have wanted them to have a good life of what he achieved.
A little bit of generational difference there, I think.
Anyway, you can't go to visit it unless you provide ID, proof of wealth and sign an NDA, apparently.
Wow.
So there you go. OK, I think we've got to get to the news headlines. That was plenty of fun. Thank you all. Here's Sophia.
Thanks, Pip. It's 11:32. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB Newsroom. Scotland's First Minister has cancelled a planned speech on independence as he faces a leadership contest next week. It's after the collapse of the SNP's power-sharing deal with the Greens yesterday, leaving Humza Yousaf in charge of a minority government. A vote against Mr Yousaf wouldn't automatically end his term as First Minister, but it would throw doubt over his ability to govern. A former parliamentary researcher has been ordered not to contact MPs after he was charged with spying for China. Christopher Cash, who's 29, and 32-year-old Christopher Berry are accused of offences under the Official Secrets Act. The pair appeared at Westminster Magistrates' Court this morning, but were not required to enter any pleas. 2 men have been charged with immigration offences after the deaths of 5 migrants, including a young girl, who were trying to cross the English Channel. The 5 migrants were on one of several packed boats that pushed off from the beach of Wimereux in France on Tuesday morning. In the US, the actress Ashley Judd says the overturning of Harvey Weinstein's rape conviction shows that courts aren't serving the needs of victims. Her allegation of sexual assault by the Hollywood producer helped spark the Me Too movement. It's after Weinstein's 2020 rape conviction was overturned yesterday. However, he'll remain in prison for other crimes. And the world's first personalised vaccine for skin cancer is being tested on British patients. The jab uses the same technology as the COVID vaccines and has the potential to stop lung, bladder and kidney cancers. And for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2516 and 1.1661 euros. The price of gold is £1,876 and 41 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100's at 8,114 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Up at noon, good afternoon, Britain, with Tom, Emily, and a very, very special guest. Tom?
Yes, it's not just myself and Emily today. We're joined by our special friend, Humza Yousaf. Now, the question is, will the First Minister of Scotland outlive this special lettuce?
Yes, so we were discussing this in the newsroom, and I'm sorry I didn't veto it.
I'm much more keen on the lettuce than Emily.
Will Blue Peter work take you?
It took me all morning.
It took him all morning. Will Humza Yousaf remain?
Oh, very good.
Or leave?
Could Humza Yousaf's career hit the iceberg?
He's speaking this afternoon, isn't he? But
He
they're
is.
saying he's not going to announce his resignation.
Well, there's
Or do you
two
think...
big new bits of news. So the first, of course, is that his early speech today was cancelled. Clearly frantic conversations are going on behind the scenes right now. But there is this second speech where he's going to set out what's going to happen. But is it entirely in his gift? What's going to happen? He no longer has a majority in the Scottish Parliament, and the Scottish Labour Party have now tabled a second motion of no confidence. So not just a motion of no confidence in Humza Yousaf as a leader, but in the SNP government as a government. If that passes, there could be an early election.
So he may stubbornly carry on, do this speech, but things appear to be crumbling around him, and it may well be out of his power. But we shall see. These things move very quickly, as we know.
So what happens? So if he announces his resignation,
then Humza Yousaf wins. Then our good friends
in Holyrood.
Oh, sorry, I thought I'm so protective of my little lettuce.
You take that home for tea?
I certainly won't. I'm going to be having this. I'm going to take very good care of him and see who lasts longer. It's a crucial and very original idea.
Crucially, it will be Tom who takes it home. He's not passing that off on anyone else.
No.
It's very sweet.
But of course, the pressure is mounting hugely in Scotland. For a moment of seriousness, we still need to see what Ash Regan, the casting votes in this no confidence motion, what will she extract from Humza Yousaf? And frankly, is it a viable situation? Even if she does vote for him the first time, how long can this very precarious situation last? Could it last longer than the life of a lettuce?
Don't worry, it won't all be Humza Yousaf today. We've got the Rwanda bill. We've got the Irish Deputy Prime Minister saying that the threat of Rwanda is the cause of the influx of migrants into his country. And we're speaking to Miriam Cates and Ian Duncan-Smith too.
Nice.
Lots on.
Big names. Good
Thanks
stuff.
very much,
Look forward to it.
both.
Thank you both.
For now, though, you are with Britain's Newsroom on GB News. Stay with us.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
The Princess of Wales is now officially the most popular royal. This is a YouGov poll that found that over 75% of people have a positive view of Princess Catherine, with Prince William only slightly behind his wife at 73%. Cameron Walker, our royal correspondent, is here with this one. Well, what would you read into that, and as to why?
Well, I think it's hardly surprising. Since the start of the year, the Princess of Wales's popularity is up 6 points with the British public, according to this YouGov poll. And obviously, at the start of the year, she went into hospital for abdominal surgery and has subsequently been diagnosed with cancer and is undergoing surgery. Look, the Princess of Wales, since becoming a member of the royal family, has committed no major faux pas. There's been no particular scandal with her. She always puts family first. And I hate the phrase born a commoner, but she wasn't born into aristocracy. She was not born into the royal family. She gave up her old life. And yes, that comes with lots of privilege, being a member of the royal family, but it also comes with enormous challenges, such as everybody prying into your private life, particularly when it comes to your health. And I think the British public are very much on side with that.
Whereas Prince Harry and Meghan continue to be unpopular. 76 compared to 31% having a positive opinion of Prince Harry, and only 26%, 50 points less than Princess Catherine, is Meghan.
Yes, still not looking great for Harry and Meghan. Prince Andrew is far below them as well.
Doing well on negative views, meaning fewer people have negative views about her than anyone else, is the Princess Royal, Princess Anne.
Indeed, yes. The most hard-working royal, if you go by the number of engagements she carries out each year. No nonsense, no fuss. She never gets herself into any kind of arguments or scandals.
GB News is Britain's election channel. And from Thursday, the 2nd of May...
the people decide.
As the country heads to the polls in a rush of elections. We'll take you through the night as the first results come in.
And we'll pick up at breakfast
with the very best guests and analysis.
And on the weekend, the results won't stop, and neither will we.
We'll explore what it all means for you as we look ahead to the general election.
Continuing coverage live from Thursday, the 2nd of May at midnight on GB News.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people.
To go where other broadcasters refuse to go. How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's 11:41. You're with Ben and Pip on Britain's Newsroom on GB News. Lots of emails flying in.
Yeah, and still lots of them on this poll. Jeffrey, good morning. The Tory government is a disaster, hasn't got a clue what to do. The Labour Party have not had to raise their pace with government infighting. Genuine Conservatives need a new party like Reform, but our voting system conspires against them.
David, good morning. You say the Labour Party have left the country skint the last time they were in power. How can you trust anyone who hasn't done anything? Did you just read that one as well?
No, I didn't. Let's go to KG. Morning. You vote for someone who you think deserves your vote. If you think no one deserves your vote, then don't vote.
And Keith, you say, why vote when there's no party worth voting for? Which is actually, you know, it's a common theme, actually. The disillusionment with our political class is growing and getting ever deeper. Very interesting. Vincent, you say, I will never vote for the lying Tory party again, but I'd also never vote Labour in a million years.
Well, there are fears that the local elections could be bad news and could be pretty catastrophic for Rishi Sunak and the Tory party.
Yes, expert pollsters, they say the Tories are set to lose more than 400 council seats, with Tory peer Lord Hayward saying he expects Labour to gain between 200 and 250.
Well, joining us to dissect this a bit is broadcaster and journalist Emma Webb. So, 6 days people go to the polls. I mean, you do have to wonder what the turnout is going to be like. Is there going to be a protest vote, like KG says? If you think no one deserves your vote, don't vote.
It's interesting. I mean, I don't know which way this is going to go. You can imagine that either there'll be a very high turnout or a very low one, because people, as you say, so disenchanted with our politics. And this is, whichever way it goes, this will be a foreshadowing of the general election. And so whether this turns out to be Armageddon for the Conservative parties, it's more a case less of the individual seats that are won or lost, but how many councils end up being controlled by Labour, how many councils are lost by the Conservatives. But it will be an indication, I think, and it will inform the strategies of both parties going forward, particularly if it's a case of trying to, knock on doors and get more people out voting. But either way, I mean, I don't think whatever recent victories there may be with the possibly Pyrrhic victory of the Rwanda bill being passed, whether that's going to translate into any sort of, what's the right way to put this, favour towards the Conservatives, to put it nicely.
I mean, there is thinking that Sunak, a week before these local elections, he's had not a bad week, with that bill now becoming law.
Unfortunately, I think it's going to take more than a single good week, because I think people are looking at this in the greater context. And no matter, what Rishi Sunak does and the amount of time that this government have left, of course, there will be a good and a better or worse times to call a general election. But the reality is that people feel enormously let down, but they also feel that the alternative of a Labour government is not going to solve these problems either, that Labour would probably be worse on tax and worse on immigration and border security. So I don't think that the British public trust the Labour Party, but I think they also just feel completely disenchanted, as the viewer said there. Who do you vote for when both are looking like such bad options?
Can I just bring you this from Politico last night? It says top political scientist John Curtis has predicted another referendum on Britain's membership of the EU could take place within the next 16 years. He said, I think the 2016 referendum is going to be as unsuccessful as the 1975 one. Another referendum within 16 years, Emma.
Gosh, well, I hope that that's some delusional, wishful thinking on his part. I can imagine possibly a referendum on our membership of the ECHR, but I think it would be much more likely that Labour would bring us into a cosier relationship with Europe and cede some of our sovereignty to them in a softer, more backhanded way than a straightforward referendum on rejoining the European Union.
Yeah, got it. Yeah,
I think that would be a far too complicated thing to handle and politically to put to the British public, particularly at a time when we have all of these other problems, including security issues, geopolitical issues. I just think it would be a...
Yeah.
But I'd be interested to know why he's predicting that.
I mean, John Curtis, though, Professor of Politics at the University of Strathclyde, well-respected in Westminster, one of the most respected pollsters going. He says, if you look so far what's happened to attitudes, and if you look at the age profile of attitudes towards Brexit, you can see why. So he reckons youngsters are against Brexit. They're going to get older, come of age, and they'll have more influence.
Far be it from me to second-guess the great prophet.
Yes, yeah. Thanks, Emma. Appreciate that.
Coming up very shortly, Prince William surprises students in the West Midlands during a school trip to support mental health.
You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News. Stay with us.
Hello, good morning. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update. After a bright start, it will cloud over for most of us, and it's going to be another cool feeling day. And we will start to see a few showers breaking out, particularly across southwestern England, where this low pressure system is introducing some weather fronts. That's going to introduce a risk of some very heavy showers through this afternoon across many areas of Devon and Cornwall, then into parts of Dorset later on. Further north, for many areas of northern parts of the UK, it will turn cloudier through this afternoon, and then there's a risk of a few showers. But I think most areas should stay dry, and in the sunshine, it won't feel too bad. Highs of around 11 or 12 degrees, still a little bit below average, but still quite cool underneath the thicker cloud across parts of the Midlands and for much of South Wales as well. It'll stay cloudy across southern areas throughout tonight, but in the north, it will turn much drier and clearer through tonight. So it's going to be another cold and crisp start to Saturday across the north, but in the south, cloud will continue to build and those heavy showers will continue their journey northwards through this evening. So parts of South Wales into the Midlands could see some of that heavy rain by the start of the weekend. And across the south, it's going to stay quite cloudy throughout Saturday with those showery outbreaks of rain continuing. It might turn a little bit brighter across the south coast by lunchtime, but then those sunny spells will introduce a further risk of some heavy, possibly thundery downpours. Across northern areas, though, after a bright start, cloud will thicken once again with a risk of a few showers, but it won't feel too bad at all in the sunshine.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me.
My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter, with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country. That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. The Prince of Wales shocked 1,200 pupils when he made a surprise visit to a high school in the West Midlands.
Yeah, and it was after 12-year-old Freddie Hadley from Sandwell wrote a letter to Prince William inviting him to see his school's mental health campaign. Our royal correspondent Cameron Walker was there.
It's not every day you're pulled out of class to meet a prince, but for St Michael's High School students yesterday, that's exactly what happened.
When did you find out he was coming to your school?
Like 10 minutes ago.
Bit of a shock.
Yes.
We just can't believe that someone so important has turned up to the West Midlands to see, 1,200 children.
they would never get this opportunity again, and we're just a little bit shell-shocked that somebody so famous has turned up today.
Prince William's visit to the West Midlands was sparked last October when 12-year-old Freddie Hadley invited him to come and learn about the school's mental health campaign. Freddie's letter was posted on X, and to his surprise, William personally tweeted back on World Mental Health Day. He apologised for not being able to visit, but asked pupils to keep up their important work. Fast forward to yesterday, and Freddie got his wish.
Seeing him walking down, I was like, I cannot wrap my head around this. It was like a good thing I didn't get told, because obviously it wouldn't be such as a big surprise. But when I seen him, I was like, gosh, this is like once in a lifetime chance for sure.
The pair sat down for the all-male Matrix project, which runs the Am I Manly Enough campaign, tackling the stigma around male mental health. William said he realised his passions to solve homelessness and addiction were both connected to mental health problems, which is why he's committed to solving that too. He said boys and men need to talk more about their feelings.
The suicide rate in young men is just terrifying, and I wanted to do something about it.
The group broadcasts a local radio show with fun segments, which William was all too happy to take part in.
I've been asked to produce a dad joke, so I'm kind of trying to channel Jack Whitehall, because most of the jokes are pretty dad-like. Knock knock.
Who's there?
Interrupting cow.
Interrupting cow.
No. That's what I hear a lot at home at the moment.
In a bizarre turn of events, comedian Jack Whitehall was happy with his royal badge of honour, tweeting, "Rinsed by the future king." The Prince of Wales spent time shaking hands with as many pupils as possible before he left. He was impressed by St Michael's whole school approach to mental health. It's understood these pupils are more inclined to open up about their feelings, successfully breaking down stigmas and paving the way for happier and healthier futures. Cameron Walker, GB News.
He still tells bad jokes, Prince of
What
Wales.
was his joke?
It was so awful, I can't even remember it. An interrupting cow or something.
Oh, OK. Yeah, I'm not a very funny person at all, so I'm going to be the last person to criticise anyone else's jokes.
Well, somebody here says that they're asking if you've had your Weetabix this morning after the discussion we had about feminism and Petronella Wyatt's comments. Also, David here says, Pip, having children and then grandchildren is such a great joy to us. You will have missed out, because I say I've got no regrets about not having children, especially when you're older, you'll have missed out, and nobody comes round to see you in your care home.
Oh, I will, Pip.
Thanks, Ben.
I'll be there.
I've got lovely nieces.
Yeah.
I just never, even when I was a kid, I wanted lots of dogs. I didn't want lots of children.
That's
and
fine.
I've got lots of dogs, so I'm happy.
Mary agrees with you. She says, I have no children, not by design, but as Pip says, that's life. Quite happy and personally not career obsessed. And Jill says, I have no children. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, it's the same comment. Yeah, same one. There we go.
Paula, having children doesn't stop loneliness. You can't have adult conversation with your children. Thank you for all your thoughts and contributions today. It's almost the weekend, and I'm out of here.
Yes. Thank you for watching. Here's Britain's Newsroom. No, good afternoon, Britain. Tom and Emily.
Bye-bye.
Liz Truss famously couldn't outlast a lettuce, but now the race is on between the Scottish First Minister and our friend here, Humza Yousleaf.
Lots of adult conversations here on Good Afternoon Britain. But yes, should life in prison actually really mean life? A schoolgirl who tortured her grandmother before dumping her in a canal is out of prison and back on our streets again. Should life mean life? All of that after your weather.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good morning. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update. It's going to be another fairly cloudy and rather cool day, and there's a few showers around for some. But for the time being, should stay fairly dry and bright through the rest of the morning, particularly across north and western areas of the country. Clouds going to bubble up, though, as we head towards lunchtime and the risk of showers starts to develop. Though I think many areas across the north should stay fairly dry. Now, towards the south, we start to see cloud thicken through this afternoon across many areas of Wales, into parts of the Midlands and across the south coast ahead of this showery band of rain that will push up northwards throughout tonight. And temperatures will be well below average for the time of year. So another fairly cool day today. Cloud will tend to fade away across northern areas through this evening, so it will be a clear and dry night once again across many areas of northern England, Northern Ireland, much of Scotland, and there is a risk of a further frost for Saturday morning. Across the south, though, cloud will continue to thicken as this band of showery rain continues to move northwards, but that will introduce some milder air, so it's not going to be quite as cold across southern areas of England and Wales through this evening. Now, it will be a bright but cold start across the north on Saturday. The best of the sunshine is likely to be in the morning. I think as you head towards the afternoon, cloud will bubble up once again, and there's a risk of a few showers, but again, most areas should stay dry. Across the Midlands, though, cloud will really thicken. It's going to be quite a dull afternoon, and temperatures will be suppressed. And in the south, any brighter spells that develop could pep off a few showers.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
It's the final week to see how you could win our biggest prize yet. With thanks to Variety Cruises, a family company sailing since 1942, you have the chance to win a £10,000 7-night small boat cruise for two. With flights, meals, excursions and drinks included, you'll be able to choose from any one of their 2025 Greek adventures. Plus, you'll also win £10,000 in tax-free cash to make your summer sizzle. And we'll pack you off with these luxury travel gifts. Hurry, as lines close on Friday. For another chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please